Welcome, listeners. You are tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and with Corey.
Yes, that's me. Hello, everybody.
Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And we broadcast every Tuesday from 7 to 8 Pacific time on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley from the unceded territory of the Stola Nation. And we are also live streaming on YouTube, on Dr. Leslie Phillips's YouTube channel, as well as on the Awaken Your Psychic Abilities Facebook group. So welcome everyone who's joining us live. And if you're in either of those two groups, of course, you're in our virtual chat room and you can converse with us as we progress through tonight's show. Every week, we have a different topic about metaphysics and spirituality. And this week is no different. And in fact, what we've been doing for this whole season is we've actually been doing a series, and the series is about intuition and chakras. So starting in June, from June
And it's
until the
exciting.
end of the year, every week we talk about a different chakra and its relationship to a different type of intuition. And so tonight's topic is the fifth chakra and the inner voice. So that's what we're talking about this evening. So we've already been through the first, second, third, and fourth chakras. So if you're just joining us and you haven't heard the rest of the series, then you can catch it on the podcasts available on drlesliephillips.com. And also by scrolling down through the feed on the Facebook group. So the fifth chakra, first of all, what is the fifth chakra all about? The fifth chakra is all about communication. So this is the energy center that is it's positioned here in your throat, near the cleft of your throat. And it channels 5 different psychic abilities. One of them we talked about last week, and that was Clairaudience. Actually, that was 2 weeks ago. And we're going to be talking next week and the week after about telepathy and telepathic communication, and also pragmatic intuition. So there's 5 things: clairaudience, inner voice, broadband telepathy, narrowband telepathy, and pragmatic intuition. So tonight's show is all about the inner voice. And so what is the inner voice? The inner voice is your higher consciousness communicating to you the body personality. So, and people often have difficulty knowing what is their true inner voice, because there are so many other voices. There's the voice of the ego. There's the voice of the intellect. There's the emotions. There's other people's voices that might be impinging upon your reality. So how on earth do you distinguish between all those other voices and all those other messages and your inner voice? And so that is what we are going to be covering in tonight's show. And I'm going to read a passage from my book
Does
about the
everybody
inner
have an
voice.
inner voice, Dr. Leslie?
Everybody has an inner voice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody has an inner voice. Yes. You are spirit. You are spirit. You are not your physical body. But there are mechanisms for you, the higher consciousness, to communicate with the body personality self. One of them we've talked about already, which is clairsentience, which allows you, the higher vibration being, to tune into your physical body and communicate, listen to the body's communications to you. The inner voice is how you communicate to your body personality self. And a famous example of somebody discovering their inner voice that many of the listeners may have heard about is Eckhart Tolle. He's a famous spiritual teacher who his spiritual awakening happened when he realized there were two voices talking to each other in his head, in his mind. And all of a sudden he said, well, which one of them is me, and how can there possibly be two voices here? And that triggered a massive awakening where he overnight went through this like spiritual awakening. And that was him discovering his inner voice. So let me share a little bit from my book. And if you don't know the book is called Intuition and Chakras, and it was published this year by Llewellyn, and it covers 22 different psychic abilities and their relationship with the chakra system, and gives you information about how to access those psychic abilities and what could be blocking you. So there is a voice inside you that sounds just like you. So here's a clue. Your inner voice sounds like you. It's a voice you can always trust. So think about all of the different voices, all of the different messages that might come into your consciousness. Some of them are critical, aren't they? Some of them are judgmental. That's not your inner voice. Your inner voice sounds like you, and you can always trust it. It's always supportive and gives appropriate guidance that will feel right to you. So you will intuitively sense that the information being received by your inner voice, it feels right. So often we receive messages that we feel uneasy about, that we feel uncertain about. Then don't follow that guidance. That's not your inner voice. Once you recognize it, it can be hard to miss, but easy to ignore unless you make a practice of paying attention to it. And that's so true for so much of our intuition, isn't it? There's one thing to receive the intuitive communication and another thing to actually act on it. Was there a question, Corey? I saw you. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
It's from Dominic. He said, is there a way to distinguish between the voice of God, technology, and actual clairaudience?
God,
technology. God, technology, and actual.
And clairaudience.
Yeah.
Is God, technology one phrase, or God, comma, technology?
It's one phrase. It doesn't look like there's a comma there.
Okay.
No comma. Maybe Dominique, if you could just be a little more explicit about that, Dr. Leslie will answer that then.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. I've not heard the phrase God, technology before. Yeah, so what I was saying is, I mean, that's a big thing for most of us. Even when we get to distinguish the voice of our intuition, our inner voice, it's a complete other thing to actually have the courage to follow it, isn't it? And let's talk about some of those other voices, seen as we've been asked about it, because there can be so many other voices to filter out. Like I said, your ego, your intellect, other people's voices. And when we argue, the ego can have a tendency to be righteous, right? When your inner critic or your outer judge is activated, they can override your inner voice. The intellect can be a handy tool if you're solving a problem, But if you limit yourself to logic alone and ignore your inner voice, you might not see all of your options. You might not be aware of all of your options.
So Dominique said that she's talking about this is basically the voice of God. How to tell the difference between the voice of God and your inner voice. The voice of God and actual clairaudience. I'm sorry, I'm whispering.
Okay. How to tell the difference between the voice of God and your
And actual
clairaudience.
clairaudience.
In one sense, all voices are the voice of God. Because God is everything and everyone. So let's say how can you tell the difference between, that's a really good question. Give me a moment. Because when I'm communicating with divine source energy, I tend to do it through my crown chakra. Because the crown chakra is the gateway to higher consciousness. So I tend to sit in my crown chakra and be still and know my God directly through the crown chakra. And so I feel God, for me, in one sense, is the great all that is. In another sense, is the highest, most trusted divine source that I can personally reach. And clairaudience, and this is my perception and how I use this, tends to be something that I use more to tune into my spirit guides, angelic beings, and so on. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess my concept of God is not a personified God that has a voice. And so Dominique, right, asked the question. Well, I hope that answers the question, Dominique.
Yes, she did. Yes.
Okay, good, great. Shall
I
we
do
continue
have
talking about
I have another question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, Dominique is a little clearer here. She says, it is a technology that is used to transmit voices into people's mind in which people believe that they are hearing the voice of God. It's proven technology used to manipulate. Oh, interesting. So Juan says, I hear a male's voice when falling asleep. Could that be a spirit guide or a family member?
He hears a voice when he's falling asleep.
A male's voice.
Yeah. Okay, sure. I'd have to look at that. Who's doing that? Who's the name of who's asking it, Corey?
Juan.
Juan. Well, the hit I get on it is it's more of a spirit guide. It's more of or in some senses, another aspect of you, because sometimes our spirit guides can be other aspects of our own higher consciousness and our own higher being. And in some senses, that's what we're talking about this evening is the inner voice. The inner voice is different to clairaudience. So we talked about clairaudience last time, and clairaudience is hearing voices that are not your own voice. The inner voice is hearing your own voice, the voice, communications from your own higher being. And so actually what I was seeing was that felt to me like an aspect of your own consciousness communicating to you, which could be your inner voice, could be a guide. All right, so shall I continue, Corey, talking about the inner voice, which is, if you're just tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth, tonight's topic is the inner voice and clairaudience. So I was reading an excerpt from my book, and I'm just going to go back to that. I've lost my place, but I'm going to go back to that. Let's look at some examples of how the inner voice might show up in your life. If you're physically attracted to someone, your inner voice might agree or disagree. But either way, it's giving you a spiritual perspective on the situation. Your inner voice could guide you to make good financial decisions or lead you to a windfall. It could help you make good career decisions, help you buy a new home, or offer guidance about a health condition. If you're a spontaneous person who can act in the moment, you could be following your inner voice. If you can go against the pressure of expert opinions or other people's recommendations when making big life decisions, you're also paying heed to your inner voice. If you still feel confident when a professional contradicts your inner voice, congratulations. However, if you need to seek a second opinion, or worse, give your power away, then you do not yet trust your inner voice. And here is another story, an example of somebody discovering their inner voice. So a writer realized there were multiple voices in his head, all speaking at once. He noticed different layers in his mind, all conversing on different topics. After searching among them for a while, he identified a main voice that felt like him. He noticed he had control over it, whereas the other voices had a life of their own. Once in a while, his main voice wondered if the others could be quieted, but then he drifted off into thoughts about his relationship, his job, or the weather. Then a strange thing happened. The main voice shouted to the others to be quiet. They kept going regardless, making him feel frustrated. He wanted peace inside his head, but felt powerless to attain the meditative state he desired. Some days later, he was busy working when all the voices suddenly stopped, and for the first time ever, he had a quiet mind. It was such an alien feeling, it frightened him. Gradually, he learned how to cultivate this state of being. He discovered there was one main voice that he could hear and control once the din was quieted. This was his inner voice. Nowadays, he's able to focus his mind and ask questions directly to his inner voice. He receives verbal answers that are usually succinct and to the point. And by listening, he knows he's on the right track. And I just share that example from my book and somebody's story of discovering their inner voice, in case you can identify with that, in case you resonate with that. Because I think so many of us do experience these multiple different voices. And I go back to Dominique's question earlier, because you clarified that a bit, Dominique. So you're talking about a form of programming, a form of mind control or projection of thoughts into somebody else's space to make them believe that it is the voice of God and a voice that they should listen to. And so, yeah, that is another example of how we can be thrown out of alignment by listening to a voice that is not our own and not in our highest and greatest good.
So Juan says, yes, I don't hear my own voice, but hear somebody else's.
Okay.
And then Dominique replies, I have awoken into that twilight space and have literally heard the next door neighbors having a conversation as if it were in my own room.
Yeah, that's
interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that's an example of clairaudience. And we talked on the show 2 weeks ago about clairaudience. So you could, if you haven't heard that show, you could tune into it. Clairaudience is not just about tuning into spirit guides. It actually is something that can occur between living people, like you being able to listen to your neighbors or being able to communicate with your friend that lives halfway across the world. And the other thing about both of these examples, clairaudience and the inner voice, is the communication is verbal, is spoken language. It's received in the version of language. Whereas what we're going to talk about next week, telepathy, is actually non-verbal communication. Have we reached time for a break, Corey?
Way over.
Listeners, you've been tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and with Corey, and we will be back after these messages. Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and with Corey.
It's just so enthralling, you know?
Yes. Welcome to our Intuition and Chakras series, which I'm doing in celebration of my book called Intuition and Chakras. And this week, we're talking about the fifth chakra again, which is the one that's located in the cleft of your throat. And it's responsible for a wide range of both physical and spiritual aspects of communication. So it governs communication. It gives your ability to express your authentic self. And the inner voice is the voice of your authentic self. So tap into your own higher information and then clearly express it outwardly in the way you express yourself in the world. So
Juan has another comment on this.
Sure.
Before you start. Can you receive information from your higher self through gut feeling? My answers have always come in the form of a gut feeling.
So gut feelings relate to your second chakra, which is the energy center that's 2 finger widths below your navel. And it relates to tuning in intuitively to emotions, like you said, feelings. And that is, it's a different channel for receiving your intuition, if you want to put it that way. And it relates to body-spirit communication in that often it's the body that's having a feeling, a sense of doom, a sense of danger, a sense of everything's not right about this situation. And through the psychic ability of clairsentience, your higher being is able to connect with what's going on in your body's reality and how your body is communicating to you about what's going on in its reality. So in some senses, we might think of clairsentience as how you, the higher being, listen to your body and its messages and its intuitions and its feelings about things. And the inner voice is how you communicate to the body personality from the higher being. Hope that makes sense. Good. All right. So let's continue talking about tonight's topic, which is the inner voice and the fifth chakra. So I'm going to read a little bit more from my book. You are consciousness, and your body is your vehicle for experiencing physicality. Your inner voice is you, the eternal self, talking to your body personality. It's that still, quiet voice inside that lets you hear your higher guidance. The inner voice sounds like you and is a trusted source of information. It's the way you can receive answers from higher aspects of your own consciousness. How clearly you can receive your inner voice depends on how strongly you identify with your illusory self and how much you open to the voices of others. Your ego is a construct of beliefs and behaviors that were due from pain. Unfortunately, your ego may be the dominant force governing your life. It's like a bandage covering the wounded child within, and it might trick you into thinking that it is your inner voice. You can tell the difference if you remember your inner voice is always supportive, will never criticize, will never judge, will never say you're not good enough. It doesn't boast, it doesn't compete, or have you believe that you are better or worse than others. So all of that list of things is an example of some of the things that come through the voice of the ego: competing with others, criticizing others, judging yourself, and so on. That's not your inner voice. External voices from other egos can make you unclear about your personal desires and your own information, and listening to them will feel confusing. But if you listen to your inner voice, you will know what is right and true for you. You can ask your inner voice questions and listen for its answers. In time, you can learn which voices come from your brain, which come from other people who wish to influence you, and which come from your eternal essence, from your higher being. You can also learn the difference between your body's emotions, which are a communication from your body to spirit, and your inner voice, which is a communication from spirit to your body personality. And I mean, I guess, and I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but for me, one of the ways I tell the difference between these different voices is if it my clairaudience, I tend to hear it as though it was in the location of near my ears, even though I'm not hearing it like a physical auditory sound. Whereas when it's my inner voice, I tend to receive that near my voice box. So that's one of the ways that I tell the difference, is apart from it sounding like me, is that I feel it like it is where I would be talking. And this is where, and the clairaudience is where I would be listening. And then the telepathic communication is more in the chest area and the sinuses, because that's where the telepathic channels are located. So that's my personal experience. And I've not spoken to too many other people to know whether they have the same experience that I do on that. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. And I think it's a good time really to open to the listeners' questions. And you can ask about tonight's topic, which is to do with the fifth chakra and the inner voice, as you have been doing. Or you can ask about something else if you want.
So we have a couple of questions already.
Yeah.
And first of all, Juan says, thank you. That makes sense. And then Juan says, is ringing in the ear connected to clairaudience?
Yeah. So I wrote in my book about my personal experiences with this, and yes. So one of the symptoms I've seen in a lot of people, and I experienced myself when my clairaudience was first opening up, was a few different things. Ringing in the ears was one symptom. Another one that I got was Morse code, dots and dashes, like this in my ears constantly. And so for sure, anomalies like that, annoying, frustrating, irritating noises and high-pitched squealing and beeping and all of that can definitely be a sign of your clairaudience, your fifth chakra opening and your clairaudience opening. And in fact, one thing I used to do, which will sound odd when that was happening, is I used to have a bath and leave the tap running. And somehow the sound of the tap running would help me drown out the beeping sounds. And also somehow I was able to also, I guess, elevate my vibration so I could actually start hearing things as well. So that's a strange practice, but it worked for me. Do we have another question?
Kelly says, I always stop and listen to ringing and try to receive, but never really get anything.
Yeah, part of that also is, so one of the things we talk about in psychic development is this body-spirit dichotomy. Spirit has a super high vibration, and your body and your physical senses and all of that has a much lower vibration because it's made of physical matter. So one of the things that we're doing on our psychic development journey, on our intuition development journey, is reducing that differential by raising the frequency in the physical body. That's why the psychic development path is one that has to involve self-healing, because you need to raise the vibration in your body to bring you closer to those higher octaves of communication. So that's a long-winded way of saying that one tip for that, Kelly, is to, if you can be raising your vibrational frequency, right? So, because something that you're tuning into now that sounds like a dot or a squeal, as you raise your vibration, may start to sound like a communication rather. So that again has been my experience. Like now I don't have any of those beeping sounds or Morse code sounds or any of those symptoms and side effects that I had earlier on. I never get any of that. But I am able to listen to my spirit guides and communicate with them through my clairaudience. And I really believe that that's just a facet of me having raised my vibrational frequency so that I'm on the same wavelength, I'm on the right wavelength now to tune into it. So I hope that helps.
Okay, we have a question from Callie. My inner voice always gives me pins and needles.
Really? That's interesting. Where do you get the pins and needles? Where do you get the pins and needles? And while you're writing that, I'll just make a comment on sometimes people get physical sensations as a result of communication from spirit. And it's not always a good thing because it can be an inappropriate communication from spirit. So I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody who's communicating with their spirit guide says, I always feel a tingling on my crown. And that's how I know my spirit guide is here. Somebody else might say, well, I just hear my spirit guide talking to me, or I see my spirit guide and they communicate through a symbolic language with me. Which one of those is a genuine communication through the genuine psychic abilities? The one where you're feeling the tingling on your head may not be, because that may be that a being is inappropriately stimulating the physical system. Whereas if you use your psychic abilities in an appropriate way, you don't have to have your physical system interfered with in any way, shape, or form. Corey, it looks like she had time to write some more info about her tingling.
She says it's weird everywhere.
It's weird everywhere. Whole body sensation. Well, I'd probably have to look at that. I mean, sometimes when you get an intuition and it feels right, you can have that a sort of a feeling within yourself, oh, I'm getting, tingles now. So it may be that's what you're talking about. Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like to me. It's almost like a recognition within your physical system that this is information to pay attention to, or an excitement, almost an excitement at the spiritual communication. Great. Well, anyone else got anything they'd like to share or ask about?
I have another one here. So Kelly says, I don't know if I mentioned this. She said, I always stop and listen to the ringing and try to receive, but never really get anything. And she says, I often get the ear ringing. Well, she says, I get the ear ringing too. And they're both from Kelly.
Yeah.
I think you've answered that though. No?
Yeah, I did answer it. And I would just say, the trick is to keep on clearing out your system. So clearing out your fifth chakra, clearing out your clairaudience channels, just cleansing, clearing, raising the vibration until eventually you've got less of a differential.
We've got a couple more questions for you, but let's take a break first, Dr. Leslie.
Sure. You've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. We'll be back after a few minutes. Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth, a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality, where every week we have a different topic under that general umbrella. At the moment, we're doing a series on intuition and chakras, and tonight's topic is the fifth chakra and your inner voice. And we're at the point in the show where we answer questions for our listeners.
Okay, we've got a whole bunch more here.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so Rama says, how do you strengthen the connection with the voice of God and how to channel the guidance from above? Why the buzzing in the ear gets stronger and constantly does not stop?
So it was can you read it again, please?
How do you strengthen the connection with the voice of God and how to channel the guidance from above? Why the buzzing in the ear gets stronger and constantly doesn't stop?
Okay. So how to strengthen the direct connection with God, how to channel guidance, and why does the buzzing in the ear get stronger? Okay. So how to strengthen your relationship with God through meditation, through meditation really is the short answer to that. I mean, I would say my personal connection with, and I would say everyone's got their own unique relationship with God, because we're all unique aspects of God. So not one of us is the same, and not one of us has the same concept of God. But the way that I've done it is through meditation and through healing myself, raising my vibration, and sitting in a space of stillness and receptivity, and having a direct connection with divine source energy. So in some senses, there's a meditation I do. We talk a lot on this show about grounding, which is to create a flow of energy from your first chakra to the center of the earth. But that's actually part of different systems, call it different names. The Hara line, the Antakarana, the pranic tube, which is a line of light, a flow of energy that comes from divine source energy and then flows through all the dimensions and levels from there through the higher levels of your own being, and then down through the center of your being, and then through every chakra and down to the center of the earth. And so by focusing on that alignment with divine source energy, and by being grounded and present within your own system, and by cleansing your own system and clarifying your own system, then it becomes easier to communicate with spirit. And by, like I said earlier, sitting within the crown chakra and receiving the light of divine source energy through the crown chakra. So there's meditation's a short answer. How to channel guidance. There's many different ways to channel guidance, and really in every show that we're doing in this series, we're talking about a different way to channel guidance. So today we're talking about how to channel guidance through your inner voice. You can channel guidance using any of your psychic abilities, your clairvoyance, for example, your knowingness, your claircognizance, for example. But I guess if I was, again, to have some common denominator under all of it, it would be to be grounded, to be present, to be aware, to be, first of all, in charge of your own energy, to have a level of discernment about who you are communicating with, and then to use your unique profile of psychic abilities to receive that information. So, for example, I use a combination of my clairvoyance, my clairaudience, my knowingness, and other things. It might be a different combination for you. But again, the short answer is meditation, and the long answer is get to know yourself through meditation. Clear your system, cleanse your system, own your space, and then you are a clear receiver for the voice of God, for channeling guidance, for accessing your psychic abilities. And then your last question, why does the buzzing in the ear get louder and louder? Well, I'm wondering in your case whether there's some interference going on. So again, I would just say focusing on cleansing and healing yourself should help to alleviate that. If it's interference, then you'll be clearing the interference out. If it's just what I was talking about earlier, and it's just this phase of things opening up, then as you raise your vibration, it will also alleviate it. Hope that makes sense. Thanks for the question.
Okay, I have a message from a question from Callie, and Callie, along the lines of what you were just talking about, says, I receive messages in meditation, and my body is pins and needles, and my muscles relax, and I feel restored.
Feel what?
Restored.
Restored. That's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Now, Brian says, Dear Dr. Leslie, I've had a good deal of anxiety lately, had what could be termed as a panic attack. Is that normal with everything going on in the world, or is something else going on? Healing or some expression of energy or anything I need to know?
So I would say what's normal, but I would say in today's world, it's not surprising, is it? So, well, let's take a look, Brian, about what's going on with you and why there's such a high level of anxiety. Well, let's tie it in a little bit with the theme. The theme's body-spirit communication. And remember, we say you're not your body, you are spirit, but your body is your vessel, your vehicle that you're meant to be in partnership with this lifetime. And so often there's very little communication between body and spirit. And what I'm seeing is your body is frightened. Your body is in its kind of fight or flight stress response. And it looks like what might help is to talk to your body, exactly what we're talking about today, you know. So let's see. Give me a moment. To me, it just looks like you're not communicating with your own body. You could almost think about your body like it's your child, you know. It's okay, don't worry, we're safe, we're fine. I'm taking care of things. You know, and just keeping your body in the loop with where you're at. So I'm seeing that, because quite often people, the body is just left to cope, to be in charge. And most people's bodies is what is running their life, from the ego level of consciousness, from the, you know, mental and emotional levels, without the strong guidance of spirit. So I'm seeing for you what would be helpful is meditation, being much more grounded than you're managing to be right now, being in present time, because a lot of the fear comes from this potential future time projections of disaster scenarios. And so practicing mindfulness, being in the present moment, communicate, being present with, being grounded, being present within your own body and talking to your body. And it's, you know, your body is afraid because your body doesn't know what the future holds. Your body cannot go into the future, whereas you, spirit, can. But if you, spirit, are so much in the future because you're so concerned about what's going on in the world, then your body's going to get afraid because it doesn't make sense to the body. So be in present time with the body. Hope that helps, Brian.
Okay, I have two questions, one from Kelly and one from Tracy, and I'm giving to you together because they both sort of the same topic. It says, Kelly says, is running cosmic energy meditation daily a good way to raise vibration? And Tracy says, can you explain a little better how to raise your vibration in order to hear the messages you're receiving from the buzzing in the ear?
So yes, Kelly, running cosmic energy daily is a great way to raise your vibration. So we can run, we can ground, we can run earth energy, we can run cosmic energy. And these are techniques that are in my book, Intuition and Chakras, along with some other techniques. And all of those techniques are exactly how you can raise your vibration, because they are ways of helping you release and let go of densities and energies within your system that do not serve you. Ways of helping you let go of your pain, your past time trauma, anything that foreign energy, and so on. Being able to release and relieve yourself of all of that will naturally raise your vibration. And so yes. And then Tracy, can you tell us how to raise our vibration? I just did. You know, heal yourself. As we go through life, so many of us collect density. We collect disappointment. We get afraid. When we're afraid, we're very low vibration energy. When we're sad, disappointed, angry, those are lower on the vibrational scale. You know, we go through life, we have traumatic experiences, we have painful experiences that color our reality, and we tend to store them within our energy field. And every time we do that, we are covering ourselves up from our, you are light, you are high frequency energy, but by covering your field full of these densities, then you are separating yourself from the light. And so clear the density, clear the pain, clear the trauma, clear all of those low vibrations, and that will naturally raise your vibration. Now, you can consciously shift the vibration in your chakras, but I wouldn't recommend doing that without doing the healing work, really. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. It looks like we've just got a couple of minutes left. Probably not long enough to answer another question.
Oh, I think so.
You
Got
do?
3 minutes left, sure. Letitia says, when I see psychic mediums that tend to have a lot of skill or are able to easily access many different aspects of their intuition, as I look further into it, I find those people were able to put much of their lives into the study of intuition, much as you did. I am not able to travel the world or go study at amazing places as you have. Is all hope lost for me significantly developing my intuition?
Not at all. There's all these books, aren't there, isn't there? Eat, Pray, Love or whatever, and people go to meet a guru or a shaman, and of course not. Everything you have is within you. You don't even need to leave your house. Right? Everything is within you. So through meditation, you can meditate anywhere. You don't need to be on a mountaintop in a monastery. You can meditate anywhere. You can do these simple steps of these techniques that we're talking about that are in the book: grounding, running your earth in cosmic energy, learning to work with energy and manipulate energy. You don't need to go anywhere special to do that. It's all within you. And so, no, hope is not lost, quite the opposite. And in fact, we all have a great opportunity right now, just because we are all spending more time at home, to meditate more and focus on all of this.
Yep. Well, that's just about it, Dr. Leslie. Maybe everybody can bring back the questions that you didn't answer next week.
Yeah, next week we'll be talking about telepathy communication, which, by the way, is how animals communicate. It's how plants communicate. We also can communicate that way, non-verbal communication. So we'll have 1 week, we'll probably spend 2 weeks talking about this. I can't remember whether next week is narrow or broadband telepathy, but one of those.
Well, everybody, goodbye. It's been lovely, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you so much.